Welcome to episode 36 of Rail Talk. This is flown by, John, and it just keeps getting better and better. We're 36 episodes in. My name is Joe Bianca. I'm an ownership advisor at West Point Thoroughbreds. In addition to getting 36 episodes in the can, we have over 4,000 subscribers on YouTube right now, which is really exciting. That's a great milestone. We started with like 25 when we launched the page, and those were just friends and family. But there ain't enough Biancas and Greens in the world to have 4,000 subscribers. So if you haven't subscribed yet, get on the YouTube machine, click that subscribe button so you know when all this goodness comes out. John?
And I'm Jon Green, general manager of DJ Stable. Sorry, we've only done this 35 other times. You would think I would pick up on what my cue is. Next time you got to give me like a wink, so I know you're done talking. Anyway, Jonathan Green, general manager at DJ Stable. Joe, one of the things, aside from the 36 shows that we've done together, we've also done some individual work on Breakaway Rail Talk and also the rail betting show, aside from the bloopers as well. But we have Samantha Perry actually on Breakaway Rail Talk 8, the Ocho. And we go through a couple of the races on Florida Oaks and Florida Derby Day. So if you want some in-depth information on who's running and who you should bet on and some insight from Samantha, who is their regular handicapper as well, jump over to that show or wait for the show to be over first, number 36. Wait for episode 36 to be over and then jump over to number 8. And there's some really intriguing thoughts that she has on how to handicap the turf, how to handicap the all-weather, and some tidbits for Florida Derby Day.
Rail Talk is sponsored by Fasig-Tipton. The Fasig-Tipton April digital sale is right around the corner, April 4th through the 9th. Then we got the May digital sale, May 9th through the 14th. And then the crab cake sale, May 20th and 21st in Timonium, Maryland, will be the Mid-Atlantic May 2-year-olds in training sale. Going to be some fireworks there, I'm sure, breezing over a dirt track, which I'm sure I know a lot of horsemen appreciate, as opposed to the synthetic. You get to see them move a little bit differently over a surface that they're more likely going to be running on. And then we got the June digital sale, the Mid-Atlantic June 2-year-olds in training. And then we roll right into yearling season with the July sale, July 8th. And then, of course, the Saratoga sale, selected yearlings, August 5th and the 6th. And there's obviously big news on the sales front that we're going to get to in just a second, where Fasig, Keeneland, and OBS have all come together to unify their medication rules, which is obviously much needed and much appreciated cooperation in an industry that doesn't typically have that kind of unification. So shout out to Fasig and the rest of the sales companies for coming together and doing what's best for the horses and for the sport and for the sales going forward. Fasig, as always, is at the forefront of all these things. And those digital sales, man, we've talked about them. You can find some really nice horses that you can turn around and be racing in another week or two. So don't miss that one coming up. April digital sale, April 4th through the 9th. Now let's get to the news. This is some big news that broke just yesterday. Enhanced medication policies will be in effect at all of the major auctions in the U.S. beginning July 1st. And there was actually some unification between Keeneland, Fasig-Tipton, and OBS. They had a joint announcement yesterday. The changes, I'm reading from the press release here, the changes were made in an effort, quote, to safeguard the welfare of the horse while creating greater clarity and consistency among the nation's 3 major U.S. thoroughbred auction houses. So it's going to reduce the number of permitted therapeutic medications, increasing the number of prohibited medications, which will now include all substances currently banned under HISA's ADMC program. The penalties for the violation of rules will also be increased. So this is something we've been asking for a long time, that, I think HISA is overall doing a good job in unifying the drug policy. There might be missteps here or there, but the bottom line is we need the sales drug policy to mirror the racing drug policy, so you don't have instances like we saw, say with Jeffrey Engelhart, where he got suspended for 2 years initially for a clenbuterol positive that he said was coming up for a horse coming out of the sale. We need to all be on one page with that. And just in general, and it's not just the sales companies, but I always think, when I see the sales companies actually working together, it's like the Bloods and the Crips coming together. Obviously, very much different world, but the analogy of people who just are constantly at odds and competing with each other and fighting with each other, for them to come together, this is the genteel Kentucky version of the Bloods and the Crips uniting for the betterment of their community. So this is a big deal, all jokes aside. Jon has, I think, a little bit more experience and a little bit more knowledge on this front. So, Jon, what was your reaction to this news?
I think that this is a big breakthrough for our industry because you're talking about three competitors that constantly are, trying to poach horses from each other's inventory list for lack of a better term, and they're in competition with each other. So for OBS and Fasig and Keeneland to come together, and again, it's really sincere tip of the hat to Shannon Arvin of Keeneland and Boyd Browning of Fasig and Tommy Ventura of OBS and their respective boards for not only seeing that there's an issue at hand, but also responding to it and being collaborative. And that's something in our industry, aside from, we always talk about that we need more of. We need more unity, more collaborative thinking and working together, as well as transparency. And I think this initiative checked all the boxes. Without going too far into the weeds, Joe, on it, I know from being on the board at OBS that it was a struggle. There were a lot of back and forth about which medications should or shouldn't be considered, what the time limits were on those medications, 24 hours, 48 hours, a week. I mean, that went back and forth and there were veterinarians that were brought in to give their opinions. There were some of the testing site representatives brought in to talk about metabolism and also picograms. I hear picogram one more time, I think I'm going to puke. But basically, they brought it in to make sure that everyone who was making a decision understood exactly what the contaminant percentage should be or could be, depending on location and time of year and things like that. HISA was brought in as well to discuss some of the pros and cons, because Joe, what we forget is these horses that we're talking about, the sales horses, until they breeze or compete at a qualified racetrack or facility, HISA doesn't have purview or jurisdiction to go over, to test those horses. So, I'm glad that, again, Keeneland, OBS, and Fasig brought in representation from HISA to talk to them about it, because even though HISA doesn't have direct authority over these horses, they wanted to make this the projected system or the proposed system as in sync with HISA as possible, because even though they don't necessarily want HISA to be able to come in and do the testing themselves, they had to set a standard. So that way, like you mentioned with the Engelhart situation, it was never going to be a question of, okay, why or when did this drug infiltrate the horse's system? So I give everyone a lot of credit for it. I know there's some pushback already from people about saying, well, 48 hours, pre 48 hours of an under tack performance, if a horse is injected with medication 3 days in advance, it's not really out of their system. I get it. I understand where you're coming from, but you have to start somewhere. You have to have some kind of precedent and some kind of testable result. And if you go too far back in the timeline, then every day, every 24-hour period, my understanding is that the science gets a little less precise. So you had to make it a standard bearer of 48 hours or 24 hours, because that's almost irrefutable in court. And if you go any further back than that, there's a lot of question that could come up if things go to an appeal. So I'm glad that they set a standard. I know that for all of us, it's never enough. It's never precise enough. It's never enough as far as the penalties. But the fact that all three major sales companies got together, got into a room a few times, brought in outside expertise to ensure that this could be as precise as possible, I think is a huge step forward for us as an industry. It sets a precedent. It sets a precedent of working together. And I, for one, am very happy that we've taken this leap forward to work together as an industry. It's unprecedented in my estimation.
Yeah, no, it's huge, and it's the kind of collaboration we need more of in all facets, all sectors of the game. And it's not just about protecting the horses, which obviously should be paramount. It's also about protecting the buyers. Right. There's too much guesswork going on at the sales, And I know, John, you and DJ kind of have this as well, but West Point, we have like a no-fly list. Certain consigners we will not buy from no matter what.
Right.
And it's just, you don't want to get horses that are going to come out of the sale and then fall apart. It's just not good for the animals, and it's not good for the buyers. And this takes a lot of that kind of, I'm not going to say a lot, but at least starts to take some of that nefarious, nebulous kind of guesswork out of buying horses, because it's tough enough to project what horses are going to do once they get out of the sale and get on the racetrack, when you also have to like just kind of sense through circumstantial clues who's juicing or who's doing injections and who's doing it the right way. It just, we don't need any more variables for the horse's safety and also to protect the buyers. It just, it's an old school way of doing it, you know, where it's like, oh, well, you got the relationships that you have. You only work with those people. Everybody should be reputable. Everybody should be respectable and on the level at the 2-year-old sales, at any sale, not just the 2-year-old sales, at all the sales. And this takes, I think, the first step towards that, having a level playing field and having more honesty in the way horses are presented.
Right. And Joe, just to take it a step further, not just about this important announcement, but if you look at the Lovenbach horses that have sold, that have sold so far, you're looking at their yearlings, you look at their 2-year-olds now that just galloped on the racetrack. Why did they sell for so much money? Well, number one, they're good stock. Number two, they're basically untainted. Basically, those horses have not been asked to, they didn't have surgeries done to correct their conformation. They weren't far enough along in the process of 2-year-olds breaking and training to have any outside enhancements done, whether they needed it or not. Those horses were not injected. Those horses were not, they didn't have drugs being utilized to why? Because they weren't hurting. They weren't basically, far enough along physically where they were being asked to do things that maybe they weren't able to do. And I know when we sat down with you guys and we sat down with our other partner on this, one of the reasons why we were willing to go so high for that horse, even though it only galloped, was because it was basically a pure horse. It was untainted. The horse hadn't had anything done to it yet that would inhibit, its future progress. And there's a value to that. There's absolutely a value. So whether, you don't buy from certain consigners because you may think that they're doing things or they have done things before and you just don't have any upside in buying those horses. Or, you have a situation here where now some of these horses are coming in and just because of timing, that those horses have not had anything nefariously done to them. That's a huge buying point. And I think that is a double-edged sword. Like the fact that we put a premium on horses that haven't had anything done to them, and that's why we're willing to buy those horses, shows you that we were going in the very wrong direction as an industry. And I think that this compilation of the major sales companies coming together with HISA to try to put together these rules is a huge, huge step forward.
Rail Talk is sponsored by the Green Group, the #1 accounting firm in the horse business. No other CPA firm knows the horse industry like they do. Len owns over 200 horses, and DJ Stables won over 2,500 races. And this Saturday, big action for DJ with Hades coming up. I know John is not going to mention it or pat himself on the back at any point in the next 2 weeks, so I got to mention it right here. Otherwise, we'll never talk about it. But the Green Group also has over 800 clients in the horse business because they make the money and save them taxes. And there's a special offer for listeners of Rail Talk. Time is running short. We're only a couple of weeks away from tax day. Len's offering a complimentary confidential half-hour consultation, guaranteeing you'll get value. Hit him up, 732-634-5100. Do it quickly. As I said, tax day is approaching. Len guarantees unequivocally he'll find you value and savings. Donate to your favorite charity or whatever you want. He's always found value before. He knows he can do it with you. And I'm sorry I'm going to miss you guys this Saturday on Air Green heading down to Gulfstream, but I wish you all the best. And like I said, take advantage of that Green Group offer. I know a bunch of listeners who have already done that. Very, very valuable. And just even beyond just the tax savings, just having a sit down with Len is always valuable and always fruitful. All right, so I got a little bit of a bee in my bonnet. Cue the graphic. And if there's any sound effects that we have with it, I don't remember. But this was a big story that broke about a week and a half ago. There's a little bit of beef going on between First Racing and the CHRB. I think mostly brought about by First Racing. So First Racing, as you know, decided to close Golden Gate Fields last year. They ended up giving them a little bit of a reprieve, but they're still closing after this June. And that's a huge deal because Northern California horsemen, it's not that easy to relocate to Southern California. It's like 8-9 hours away. And also a lot of the horses up there can't necessarily compete in the races that they have at Santa Anita. So the CARF, the California Fair Circuit, and the CHRB were working together to have about, I think it was 10 weeks or so, fair circuit upstate for like Pleasanton and those tracks up there where, those horses will still have a place to run. Well, Craig Fravel and First Racing said, no. Not only are we going to close down the only track that's up there, we're going to basically try to forbid you from racing at all in Northern California. We're going to make that a complete barren wasteland in terms of racing. And the way that that's kind of the way that this beef has materialized is basically First Racing and Craig Fravel threatened the California Horse Racing Board and said, if you approve the 10 weeks or however many dates of racing up north, we might just close or redevelop Santa Anita, which is just such bad form. Santa Anita is one of the most historic racetracks in America. It's an institution in Southern California and in the American racing landscape. And you're telling me that the finances are such that if there's a 10-week meet upstate, you won't have the wherewithal to run Santa Anita? Like there's a Drake line where he says, don't invite me over if you throw another pity party. And I don't want to hear a pity party from First Racing and Craig Fravel about how it's just not viable to race at Santa Anita unless you give 0 dates upstate to Northern California racing. And correct me if I'm wrong, John, wasn't there just this big announcement about the California Cup and putting all this new purse money into these big races at Santa Anita and trying to create these big days? So if you're crying poverty while investing millions in that bullshit, that's essentially seems to me, from an outsider's perspective, like a vanity project for Belinda because she likes her big days, but doesn't seem to like the day-to-day racing at the tracks that they run. And you're bleeding horsemen already who don't want to run against 3 Baffert horses in every maiden race. But yeah, like sure, a 10-week meet up at a fair upstate is what's going to bankrupt Santa Anita and make it unviable. Like I don't know, man. To come out with this a week or two after that grand announcement, it's so hollow and it's just so obvious. And I know they're bluffing, like they're not going to close Santa Anita, at least not immediately. But it reeks of, we're the new sheriff in town. Whatever we say goes, and we might close Santa Anita. We might, pull up stakes and just leave California racing to the annals, to the dustbin of history if you don't give us our way on every single thing. You got a lot of work to do with the Northern California horsemen. I think from a PR standpoint, if that's your first basically salvo, like this is a big problem, and I just hate the way that it was approached. I know that they're bluffing and they're not going to close Santa Anita in the near future, at least. But it's such nonsense when you're throwing all this money at these big races that the big wigs are going to win in California, and then you tell me that there has to be 0 racing upstate in California. Otherwise, you might just leave no racing in California. Period. Like, I'm sorry, like that is like the pressure campaign, like that stuff needs to go. Like, you need to work with the people who you are displacing and not say you come here or otherwise there's going to be no racing in the entire state. Like, that is just so obnoxious. And it really, I don't think they realize like the wide ranging effects of everybody who's interested in California racing to read that and to listen to that and think, why would I ever have any faith in the future of the sport in my state or in my region if these are the people who are running it and they're just willing to pick up stakes and leave Santa Anita and close it or redevelop it when they don't get their way in every single little instance? John, it rubbed me the wrong way, and I don't know. I'm honestly out of words, which is not usually a problem for me, right. But this was just so nasty and so unnecessary, and really just shows how little interest in general First Racing has in running a racing product.
Joe, I hear and feel your pain as far as whether or not this was packaged correctly and promoted correctly by by First and Stronach. But unfortunately, I've gotten either used to it or just jaded over the years to being like, yeah, that's kind of the way that that Stronach runs their business. Is that the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing, and everyone has a title, but nobody's in charge, and it's just not. Unfortunately, it's not surprising. It's not surprising that they would come out a couple of weeks after making a great announcement that they were enhancing racing. They were doing things to make things better for California racing, have more interest in it, and then just a couple of weeks later, being like, well, but if we don't get the way we want, then we're going to take our ball and going home. They're not going to shut down Santa Anita. Everyone knows they're not shutting down Santa Anita, at least not tomorrow, if not anytime soon. They still have Breeders' Cup dates on the calendar as far as how important they are, and they are a very important part of racing, especially in that geographic area. But people almost roll their eyes. It's like the petulant child, where they jump up and down and scream and say, "I'm never going to do this. I don't love you." And then they calm down and realize that everything's still moving forward the way it is. That is exactly a perfect example of the way that that business is being run. And Joe, again, I don't want to give away, I can't give away company secrets or anything like that. But I can tell you from being on the Florida Horsemen's board and dealing with management at Gulfstream, it's like, depending on which way the wind blows, depends on what answer you get. And they'll you can get the answer you want, and then 2 days later, when everything is ready to be signed, all of a sudden somebody else different looks at it and goes, well, wait a second, I need to add my input into this. I never agreed to this. And it's like a big nonsense game. So people who work there can say whatever they want. At the end of the day, it's going to come down to what Belinda's mood is that moment. And like you said before, she wants to have the big splashy days, and God bless her. It's her business, so she can do that if she wants. But then you can't come back after spending 7 figures on a DJ, come back and say, well, we can't afford to do this for the horsemen because we had to pay for extra security and for extra testing and extra entertainment in order to make it a splashy day. I was once told, and again, I'm not a big ticket, high profile kind of, wear $5,000 suit person, to be in front of the camera. I was told previously that we could have, a box in a certain area of the racetrack, provided that we looked the part. So, and I don't think it meant like that I had to be like clean shaven and have a haircut like they do with the New York Yankees. It was like, oh, okay, I have to have beautiful people with me, and we all have to be wearing $5,000 designer outfits, and and be camera ready. And then we could get to be with the adults in the room and have a good box in a good location. But that's the tail wagging that dog sometimes. Yep. Is that, it's Belinda's show. And again, she's earned it. She owns it. So, she should be able to make the rules, but they have a bunch of, like I said, they have a bunch of Indians and no chiefs, or they have too many chiefs and nobody that wants to make a decision. That's just kind of standard for so I know I'm not as outraged as you are, but I think I'm not as outraged as you are because I think it's complete bullshit and they're not going to do anything. It's just what Craig felt that day. And whether he's a mouthpiece for Belinda or not, it doesn't, it's like, okay, let's just wait this out. John Sikura said it best on an interview where he was like, if you don't like the answer, he wasn't saying about Stronach directly, but about our society. If you don't like the way the answer is, wait 48 hours and you'll get a different one. And that's exactly the way that things are being run.
Yeah, well, and it's just that speaks to a larger problem that you have a company owning a bunch of racetracks that pretty clearly does not have that much interest in owning racetracks. They have interest in the big days,
sure,
like Pegasus Day or this new California Cup Day, but in terms of running the day-to-day product, not that much interest. And that's not to denigrate the entire company. Like, I'm sure that there's plenty of people, like I have a lot of respect for Aiden Butler and a lot of people that I think do have racing's best interest in heart, but at the very top, No,
Yeah.
it's not. It's not racing first, despite what the name is. And I hate the flippancy, if that's a word, of these kind of threats, because you're dealing with people's livelihoods. Like these are people in Northern and Southern California who've been doing this for decades. It's all they've ever known. And you're just going to throw that grenade out there and say, hey, you don't give us what we want, there might not be Santa Anita in a year or two. It's just so wrong and so nasty. And I think, thankfully, the CHRB did not take that threat and change their plan. They approved the dates, and we'll see. It's balls in your court now, I guess, Craig, to see if you're going to close Santa Anita. But I think you're being really awfully flippant with a lot of people's lives and livelihoods.
And Joe, I will say again, from working closely with people, there are some really good business people and people who love the industry who specifically work that I work with at Gulfstream Park. Mike Lakehouse is a phenomenal racing secretary. He knows what he's doing. He has an understanding of what races should be in the book. He can't always put the races that he wants to in the book because of a lot of other reasons, but he knows his shit. He's really, really good. Steve Scrinchi, who's the president of racing at Gulfstream, is an attorney, formerly with the Horseman Association. Smart guy, understands how to run a business, but unfortunately, he's kind of handcuffed as far as what he can and can't do, because even if something makes sense for the racetrack, if it's not what the next level above him wants, he really can't do it. Billy Badgett is about as sharp of a guy in the racing industry as there is. I mean, he was a trainer. He knows how to run a facility, and he basically does 1,000 jobs just unto itself to try to make things better for the horses, better for the people who were there, better, a better overall product for people who want to wager on it. He is at that racetrack at Gulfstream Park 24/7, and is constantly doing things. So they have a good skeleton team together to build upon. But until the top of the food chain decides if they want to be in racing or they want to be on the red carpet, that place is never going to change.
No, it's 100% right. And I'm glad we made that clarification. I don't want to denigrate the entire company. There's a lot of good people at First Racing and at Gulfstream and at Santa Anita that do the right things and have the best interests of the sport at heart. But, like you said, as long as upper management has only a passing interest in racing, I think that they're fighting an uphill battle. I want to switch to a positive note because, I bitch a lot about on this show about the disrespect that's shown to horse players, and I'll continue to beat that drum. But I got to mention when certain tracks do the right thing by the players and make it more enticing to bet on their product. And you got to go all the way to the Northwest for this one. Emerald Downs had a big announcement, a couple announcements this week. First of all, they're going to offer penny breakage on all the wagers at their meet coming up, which starts on Saturday, May 4th, Derby Day, 55-day 2024 season. You've heard me extol the benefits of penny breakage and basically how tracks that don't have penny breakage are essentially just stealing from horse players by rounding down payouts and not paying out down to the penny. But it's an interesting thing because the Kentucky legislature had to approve that. I didn't realize that there were tracks that could have unilaterally approve penny breakage, because if Emerald Downs can do it, why the hell can't the rest of y'all? So shout out to Emerald Downs for that. But also they're going to do a couple other things that I think are going to be really beneficial to the horse players. They're going to have a dynamic morning line where sometimes you look at the morning line and it bears no resemblance to the way the races are actually bet. And this is kind of aligned with, if you go on DRF, if you go on Formulator, they will take the will pays for the doubles and the pick threes and the pick fours and do like an amalgam of those and try to figure out how the races are going to be bet on the win end. Now, it doesn't always line up. Sometimes win pools are different than multi-race pools, but typically that's a much closer estimation of what the odds are going to be than some guy reading the form for 20 minutes and scribbling a bunch of numbers 3 days before the race. You got to be able to adjust for scratches, and you got to be able to adjust for, some kind of blind spots you may have had in doing the morning line. So the morning line is going to be updated approximately 20 minutes to post time, and it's going to reflect wagering in closed pools like the daily double, the pick three, and the pick four. And those updated morning lines will be displayed on the track's broadcast. So the morning line essentially it's not like a be all end all, but I think it's one of these things that you show the bettors respect by having a morning line that makes sense so they can look at it and factor that in terms of what they think is value and what they want to bet. And also they're going to display, this is another one. This is another easy one that every freaking drag should do. They're going to display the live odds until the final horse enters the gate. It drives me crazy when I'm watching tracks and they got a couple more horses loading in the gate and they take down the toe odds. It's like, what could possibly be the benefit of that? So that's another small thing that tracks could do, and Emerald Downs is doing that so that, you do have at least, obviously you're not going to compete with the CAW wagerers who sometimes seem to get it down to the last millisecond, sometimes maybe a little later.
Yeah.
But at least it shows respect to the regular players that they feel like they have a chance to analyze the odds until the last meaningful second. And one more, not to be overlooked, they're going to have a traditional 50-cent pick six each day featuring an 8% takeout. That is extremely rare to have takeout in the single digits. It just doesn't happen in this sport. Now, obviously, the pools are not going to be that great at the outset, but I really hope that horse players take notice of this and start betting in that pool, because if you get that pool to a certain amount to where you can feel the benefits of the takeout and actually have a chance of a big score and have a pool big enough that it'll pay out something decent if you hit it. I think that that's very, very worthwhile. Obviously, a lot of players will have to learn Emerald Downs and the jockeys and the trainers, but it doesn't take that long. I think it's very important, as much as we complain as horse players, and we love to fucking complain about the ills of the sport and the way it disrespects the bettors. I think it's very, very important that when tracks make a concerted effort like this to respect and reward horse players, we respect and reward them with our money in the pools.
So Wes Petrie, who is the vice president of sales and marketing at Emerald Downs, we salute you. And if you want us to continue to promote and do things well for Emerald Downs, to let the people here on the East Coast know all the good things you're doing out there, hit us up, man. We are absolutely in your camp right now, and I think I'm going to be in Banff in Western Canada, over the summertime. So, maybe we should get together and break some bread. But certainly in the meantime, if you want to send my friend Joe Bianca hat, shirt, et cetera, he is a proud promoter of Emerald Downs.
I will be. Yeah. And you lucky bastard. I want to go to Banff. That's going to be an incredible trip. But yeah, no, it's Wes, we appreciate doing the right thing by the horse players, and we'd love to have you on the show to talk more about it, because this should be the standard.
This is the way you do it.
Thing.
Yeah.
Penny breakage, 8% takeout, live odds, dynamic morning line. There's zero reason that the tracks all across the country can't do that. Maybe not the takeout. You don't want to go down to 8%, but all the rest of that shit, easy fixes to reward the horse players that are betting their hard-earned money on your product. Rail Talk is sponsored by TaylorMade. Reminder to hit up TaylorMade for those digital sales that I mentioned before, the Fasig digital sales, all the digital sales, but especially those Fasig ones, because they've been the leading consignor on the digital platforms since the advent of digital sales. So TaylorMade is the number one place to go for those, and for yearling sales. We're about 5 weeks away. We're recording this on Wednesday, March 27th. We're 5 weeks away from the summer yearling sales deadlines. May 1st is the first one. So TaylorMade obviously is at the forefront for every kind of sale, but especially I think that those yearling sales are really the place that everybody knows that they basically set the standard in the industry, and we're proud to have them as a sponsor. Obviously, TaylorMade Stallions is a big part of their business as well. So hit up the TaylorMade Stallions website to see that burgeoning roster. But yeah, the digital sales and the yearling sales coming up. They'll be here before you know it, and nobody will take better care of the clients and the horses for those sales than TaylorMade. So we are so thrilled to welcome this next guest to the Rail Talk studio, one of the most thoughtful guys in racing. He's the owner of Hillendale Farm, and also was just telling us about his second career as a falconer. Jon Sikura, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks for having me.
We're so stoked to have you. I mean, this is going to be more of a conversation. We'll let you steer the ship for the most part, because we know you got a lot of opinions on a lot of different industry issues. But let's start with the mare cap and the idea of the restricting gene pool in racing and in breeding. Obviously, the 140 mare cap is no more. I think that was kind of a blunt instrument, and it was rescinded. But I would think that a guy who pays as much attention to breeding as you do would admit that there is some kind of problem in terms of the shrinking gene pool and inbreeding. How big of a problem do you think that is? And what other kind of incentives or workarounds can we have other than the mare cap to address it?
I think sort of going back to your original point, the mare cap as presented, I think the wrong messenger presented the mare cap, which was the Jockey Club. And the public take that they had for the face of the issue was this shrinking genetic pool, inbreeding, and the deleterious effects of too much inbreeding, and maybe it transmits unsoundness, etc. All that was very unscientific. You could sort of pull at straws and try to come up with some loose connections, but for me, my primary objection was, as it was presented, every existing stallion could breed as many mares as they want, and then any new stallion had to breed 140 mares as a cap. And I thought that that sounded very unfair. In that, the Jockey Club has always talked about a level playing field, uniformity across the board and all issues. Now they're going to take something so primary as to how many mares a stallion can breed, and you're going to have two tiers. So if I have a horse that retired at 4, I can breed as many mares as I want. The next year, if I have a horse that breeds 140 mares, and while they softly explained that tiered system, I believe it was done in a way to appease the most vocal Titan opponents so that there wouldn't be a lawsuit. That didn't work. And, when there was a threat of a rival breed association that made the Jockey Club really would have made them obsolete, they left. And again, I don't think they were being genuine, because they said, well, for the good of the industry and uniformity and not to have this disenchantment, we're going to withdraw the policy. But that's not why they withdrew the policy. They withdrew because if they had a rival breed association, there'd be no need for the Jockey Club. So, I think honesty is always the best policy. And in this case, I don't think that they accurately represented, why it was undone, nor did they really think long and hard enough about what the number should be. 140 is too small. And the fact that there's a 2-tiered system, it just, I give the analogy, if we open up a college bar, you close at 12, I close at 3, they say, well, John was here a year before you, therefore he can stay open till 3 in the morning, but all new bars go to 12. Well, why would you give a rival in the same business, in the spirit of free enterprise? How are there 2 different rules for the exact same business? So that really irked me. I could never get past that. But there's no question that I take a little different approach. So you could talk about a genetic component as the reason for a mare cap, or why people think we breed too many mares. But I would tell you that standing a horse in Kentucky today, it's all or nothing. And with unlimited access to all horses, even the very best horses, there's no reason for somebody to breed to a newly introduced stallion that would stand for 10,000 or less in Kentucky, unless you're very, very lucky and have a specific horse that just had just enough of everything, bullseye. You can do it. Like Loggins, very popular horse this year. Not trying to tout him because he was a Hillendale horse, but beautiful horse, very talented. Just missed winning Grade 1 his second start, 7,500. He works. But horses that we've made in the past, Latoctum, Stormy Atlantic, horses that each had more than 100 stakes winners, I couldn't stand them in Kentucky because breeders are going to go to another horse that with maybe a little more residual to them, and they're unlimited supply. So therefore, we're going to foster and create stallion prospects in Maryland and Florida and other places, New York, that might, if they make it, come back to Kentucky. But those horses don't get a chance in Kentucky. And, I find that complicit's probably too strong a word, but, what I really don't understand is why breeders will continually be amongst a book of 250 or 60 mares, breed to all of the important freshman stallion. And then, it's kind of like a moving tent. They go from stallion to stallion to stallion. And realistically, like we obviously do our due diligence and are proud of our strike rate with our stallions. We've had, Good Magic and Army Duel and Candy Ride and Daglodor and many. But we also have horses that have been no good. Nobody's fault. It's the minority. Stallions have become important. So for a breeder to breed a nice young mare to 4 consecutive freshman sires is more likely than not. 3 of the 4, maybe all 4, are going to be no good. And you can breed to horses that had, 60, 70, 80 stakes winners. It's probably way better off for your mare. And, the other point is, there's not going to be 97 yearlings by that sire in that book, the Keeneland September sale, where only 2 or 3 or 6 of the very best get well sold. So I don't think that there's going to be a way to institute a mare cap. I think there's too many divergent points of view as to what the number should be. There's also, a very strong adherence to, the idea that it's a free country. You can breed to whom you want with your mare. So I think the issue is going to remain open. And the only chance there would be to have some kind of agreement would be, 10, 12 stakeholders that control most of the stallions in Kentucky sort of sit down at a round table and decide our business. And if you're, analogous to any other league, if the NFL had an important thing to discuss, the NFL owners would decide it. It wouldn't be decided by, fans or the commissioner. The owners would decide this issue. And, it would be a dramatic shift of seismic proportion to institute a cap. And if that's done, it does make sense that the stakeholders would be the ones to address it. And, candidly, quietly behind closed doors, you talk about some of the issues, problems, challenges, and why we think it's a good remedy. But I think in the absence of that, which is, probably we're going to remain this sort of at loggerheads, I would see the following, that, the Breeders' Cup, if the Breeders' Cup would look at book sizes and say, we haven't modernized the Breeders' Cup in more than 20 years. These thresholds of mares that are now being covered were never perceived as a reality of the business. So like 20 years ago, there was not a stallion that bred 200 mares.
Right.
And so the the Breeders' Cup have their fee contribution based upon, it goes up to 2 nominations for stallions that have had 100 mares. So from 100 mares, 100 foals, So from 100 foals to 150 to 200 to 225, 240 foals, none of those foals are, quote, taxed or included in Breeders' Cup nominations. And my suggestion to the Breeders' Cup would be to look at these new thresholds of mares bred, add extra contributions to the stallions that breed more than 200 mares. You raise millions of dollars. It's a very simple algorithm. You just look at how many mares are covered times the stud fee at the various thresholds, and sort of a peripheral look at the math. For me, it's about $3.5 to $4 million that you'd raise annually to go to Breeders' Cup purses. And, for that money to sort of not be accounted for, I think is folly. And, there's a precedent because Breeders' Cup used to have 1 nomination. Then it went from 1.5 to 2 up to the threshold of 100 mares. Now 100 foals. Now we have more than 200 foals, and it's sort of off the radar. So you can have as many foals as you want, and if I have 100 and you have 200, we make the same contribution. And so I think it's equitable. I think it's based on sort of pro rata. It's based upon the number of eligible foals you have to compete in British Cup races, and it creates, an enhanced purse structure for the World Championship. So I don't know how there could be an opposition to that, And the other thing that I thought, and it might seem gimmicky, but I thought it would add some intrigue, would be that every year you have what you call a golden ticket race. So after the draw, you'd spin the drum, whatever mechanism, you'd pull out a race, and that race would receive $1 million bonus for that year only. It would then be excluded from the group for next year. So there's 14 races. So over 14 years, everybody would run for that additional money, And I think that would create excitement at the draw. And as far as the presentation, I've said this a few times, that really in any sport, whether you're a casual fan or someone that's into sport, if you could get that chatter in the paddock where, selected owners, trainers, jockeys are mic'd up, just think of, for example, some might think he's outrageous, some love him. A guy like Mike Rapoli, if he's mic'd up and, his arms are waving, and that's intrigue. And then, you take a different personality, like someone like Todd who's quiet, and then, there's great stories. There's a young kid, his first time having a British Cup starter. There's an old man, 80 years old, has never had British Cup starter. There's a horse that's claimed. There's so many dynamic stories, and with a lead in and sort of a live mic in the paddock, I think it would make the broadcast way more compelling, not even necessarily to those of us that have a rooting interest. I'm interested, how will the curling run, and the other stuff maybe is not that important. But the casual fan, we live in a society today where this superficial media, these sound bites, these quips, that's what captures people's attention. And our business, I don't think that we really do any of it. And British Cup Day should be fun, entertaining, and whatever the phase of the business that interests you, you should be able to find sort of a channel or message that speaks to you. And it's fashion, it's gambling, it's the horses, it's so many things. And I think that content needs to be switched on and sort of dispersed to the customer. It makes it more compelling TV. That's for sure. And it's a long day of racing. And I guess primarily, let's get on one channel. We don't have to flip from 3 different times, and let's make that broadcast compelling. That's not a critique of the British Cup. I'm just saying I think that entertainment aspect of it can we can all do a better job in delivering our product, or not even better, just enhance the way we present that show. So
right.
My suggestion would be the money's there. It's been unattended. It should be attended. I think those that, and most important, so that, it's not seeing like I'm making suggestions for others, that we would have stallions that fit those categories, and I'd be a contributor to those monies raised. So I'm not asking anyone else to pay. It doesn't say, people say, oh, you're singling out Cobar. No, you don't single out anybody. There's thresholds, and wherever you fit, you fit. If I buy a season pass to the amusement park, it costs me $400. You buy a weekend pass, you should pay less. I should pay more because I'm using of the service more often. And, we're a contributory business. The British Cup is funded by us, for us. And, if you go back to the founder, John Gaines, and what he had in mind, it was a championship day to celebrate the best horses, to produce as much money as we can for those horses. And I think you have to be very careful that money doesn't, it's like a charity. You want as much of that dollar to reach your cause rather than bureaucracy, administration, reserve funds. You want to have the faith of your contributors because reoccurring income from breeders and stallion owners. That's the Breeders' Cup. The Breeders' Cup doesn't have its own business. It relies upon our contribution, and I think that however you can maximize those funds and enhance that day is well done. And certainly raising the purses from an unaddressed group of stallions that have bred mares that have been unprecedented, have never been recognized in the fee structure, is a great place to start. And failure to do that is really, it's like, again, I'm giving silly examples. Whatever, if you're taxed at $1 million and it's 40% taxation, if I make 10 million, well, I don't pay what you pay. It's incremental based on income, and should be incremental based upon mares bred in thresholds not yet addressed by the Breeders' Cup.
So John, no, that's a lot, and I just want to unpack it a little bit so that way the audience can really understand, all these different ideas that you're coming up with, because they're revolutionary in my estimation. So just stop me if I'm not recapping this correctly. But with regard to a mare cap, number one, it's like, who's got the power to be able to impose? And the Jockey Club shouldn't have been the messenger on it. Number two, we can't penalize for success. So if the marketplace wants to breed to either new stallions or to proven stallions, we can't say to them as a market, you can't do that, because we're in a society where where we can make those choices. But one thing that really I want to kind of flesh out a little bit more is this tiered tax for number of foals that occurred, because I don't think the majority of our audience, and maybe even the majority of our industry, unless you own a stallion, you don't know that the Breeders' Cup charges you 1 or 1.5 times your stud fee, depending on a multiple of factors. So that there already is a tiered tax in essence based on the number of foals with the Breeders' Cup. So is what you're saying is the Breeders' Cup the messenger that should be putting forth some rules, and I guess it's the rules of, if you want to have your horses eligible for Breeders' Cup races, as opposed to, hey, if you don't want to have your horse eligible for Breeders' Cup race, then these rules don't apply. Am I explaining all that correctly, or just kind of hash it out for me?
Sort of. It's a bit ambiguous, but so the simplistic way to say it is as follows: that the 20 some odd years ago, the Breeders' Cup, quote, modernized their fee structure. Used to be one nomination for a stallion at the listed stud, advertised live full stud fee. Then they changed it to say it can be up to 1.5 or 2 if you have 100 foals. So if I have 101 foals by a stallion, I pay 2 Breeders' Cup nominations to have my stallion eligible. But what they never counted upon, and what had never happened and was unprecedented, was stallions breeding 200 and more mares. 20 years ago, no horse bred 200 mares. I think 183, 186. No horse bred 200 mares. So in the last 20 years, when we've seen stallion book size rise and rise dramatically, essentially all foals beyond 100 are, for lack of a better word, are tax-free. So if you address these new book sizes by having a fee structure beyond 100 mares, it would recognize today's modern breeding practices, and it would produce money for the Breeders' Cup to enhance purses. Now, you're not going to curb behavior. You're not going to change book size. So if you're dealing with this new reality, until or unless the constituents could sit down and come up with an agreement, why not take whatever this figure is, I don't know exactly, $3-4 million a year and put it into British Cup purses. Or to say what we're saying right now, beyond 100 foals, you do whatever you want. You don't have to pay us anymore. You're fully taxed, if that's the word you want to use, or represented to 100 foals. After that, you do whatever you'd like. So it's really, some would say it's a penalty. If it was a penalty, you'd make it owners where 50% of all seasons beyond 100 foals go to the British Cup. Obviously, that wouldn't work, and there'd be a revolt, and it wouldn't get anywhere. But if you had incremental 100 foals up to 125, under 150, 175, 200 foals, and they all had a fee assessment, everybody's going to continue to do what they do, because if it costs me 25% of a season to have 25 foals and $100,000 horse, the math is pretty simple. And while I might rather not pay it, it's for a good cause. I think it's fair and equitable, and it's modernizing and recognizing what we do today versus 20 years ago. And the failure to do it is not capturing money that should belong to the British Cup. And other than saying I just don't want to pay it, I think there's 10 reasons why it makes sense. And then as far as a sort of an opposition, there's precedent because it's been done before, and I think it's logical and makes all the sense in the world.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the other point that I thought was really intriguing, and actually Joe and I have been texting back and forth about it when you mentioned it, is this golden ticket idea, where there's 14 Breeders' Cup races every year, and either at the draw or the day of racing, they go in a lottery style and they pull out a golden ticket of which of the Breeders' Cup races are going to be enhanced by $1 million. So in other words, if it's Future Stars Friday and the Breeders' the juvenile turf sprint is the ticket that gets pulled, that purse automatically goes from $1 million to $2 million. It would encourage drama, because we would mic people up either at the draw or in the paddock, like you mentioned, and all of a sudden that purse would increase by $1 million. The following year, that race would be ineligible for the $1 million bonus. So people wouldn't know when they're entering their horses if that race was going to be enhanced by $1 million. But I mean, shit, that would be phenomenal and great for ratings to be able to explain to the public and people why these people are getting excited, why these 12 parties in the paddock are so excited, because all of a sudden their purse money doubled or at least went up by another $1 million. That's a really fascinating idea.
Yeah, I think it'd be really exciting, and don't know if it would have any effect, but it might make for fuller fields too. You might attract a horse or two, and just you have to be careful when you talk about the industry. We all survive, but those days, Derby, Breeders' Cup, at the risk of sort of not trying to dampen our business, but the guys who lose the most money, the guys that take the biggest risk, are those game enough to buy a horse, name a horse, go to the races, and then hear 1,000,001 reasons why their horse got beat or didn't run. 1,000,000 that have been repeated, and one that's never happened before, and your trainer tells you
it's just unique, just to you.
Yes, the humidity today was terrible. He hated the humidity. So they, again, the sort of an analogy of a charity. You want to take as much of the money as you can and reward those owners, because without them, we don't have a business. And I sell horses. So the more purse opportunities, the more enhanced value opportunities, the more global opportunities there are for a horse, the more valuable my horses are, and all of us are competitive. I like to think that, we have some of the greatest stallions, broodmares, and therefore yearlings on offer in the world. And, the more they're worth, the better it is for me. And the more I can reward a customer, that is the yearling owner that's going to the races, the better it is for our game. So I think it would make the draw. You couldn't get a seat versus, sort of a sort of mundane stale sandwich. Breeders, we have a draw. That's not to get the Breeders' Cup, but that, however you do it, $1 million on offer gets everybody there or on the telephone. Do we win the golden ticket? I think, again, I'm not trying to take credit like it's a deep thought. It just, I think it's something that, again, what the opposition would be what? If you were, sort of, there's always a point, counterpoint. If you're counterpoint and you're on the Breeders' Cup board, John and I had this idea. Why would you say, I don't like that?
Right. There's no reason. And you could probably even expand it to being able to tell the bettors who and Joe, you can jump in on this one because I know you're a handicapper, where they sometimes get the short end of the stick. If it's going to be $1 million bonus for the golden ticket for the owners and the breeders in that race, you make it a guaranteed pool in that race also. And that way the bettors know that there's going to be a guaranteed payout of X amount of dollars as well. Because I think
not a guaranteed pool, because guaranteed pools are bullshit, because usually that pool is going to reach that amount anyway. So it's really there's so few instances where there's actually money contributed to the pool. A seeded pool. Like this weekend, this Saturday, they're seeding the Coast to Coast Pick 5 with $100,000. Take $1 million, seed the pool for that race or that Pick 4 or Pick 5 or whatever, because on the other end, the bettors are what fuel the sport too. So I think that would be equitable for sure. I want to go back to the breeding side for a second, because I think in addition to the gene pool potentially shrinking, I think one of the issues that people have with the way horses are bred is that they're whisked off to the breeding shed way too quickly, and that we're breeding horses who don't display enough soundness and enough hardiness. And then as a result, we're seeing fewer and fewer races out of these horses over time. Curlin's a great example, I think, of a horse that raced over seasons, from 3 to 4 to 5, raced, a good 8-10 times a year, even tried turf. Like, shout out to Jess Jackson, the late Jess Jackson, for being so sporting with him. And I think that has shown up in his foals. Curlin's foals typically get better with age and are around for several seasons. John is someone who is involved with marketing and acquiring stallions. Like, how much do you take into account, not just the brilliance of a horse, but how long they were able to stay on the racetrack?
Yeah. So I think it's a complex question, because a lot of horses with brief careers retire, and their retirement has nothing to do with exhibiting unsoundness. It's an economic decision. And that's a very complicated equation, because let's say you have a lot of these syndicates who people invest in the syndicates, and they take SF, for example, and their goal is to return to their investors as much money as they can. So they're going to sell those horses as 3-year-olds on top of their value, and they're going to get as much as they can. And someone like myself, let's just, for example, if I bought a $10 million horse, I paid for the horse in spring of his 3-year-old year. They want the money. I paid the money. Now, if I don't get a return at the end of the year breeding in 2024, he then races in 2025. I have foals in 2026. I have an accrual of $10 million plus my insurance, plus the infertility, all my costs for 24 months with 7% interest churning. The seller got his money, and that makes it a tougher deal. It's probably 15-20% of extra expense. So $10 million horses, $2 million in addition to purchase price in fees, interest, etc., before you get a return on investment. So I think it's sporting. I think it's great for the game that horses would run at 4 and 5, but I think it depends upon the owner. I remember when Harry Allio had Lost in the Fog a horse that I loved. That horse, he wanted to watch the horse run. Jess Jackson wanted to watch the horse run, but there aren't that many people that own these horses that are really willing to train at 4 and 5. when they can sell that horse and monetize him and use those funds to go to the yearling sale. But I would say one of the trends that I think is tilting and shifting this, this normalcy is the purse opportunities in Dubai, Saudi. If we could have more worldwide opportunities of huge purses, it gives a much better chance of these dynamic 3-year-olds running as 4 and 5-year-olds. The Pegasus, Breeders' Cup. There's a lot more opportunity than there was, and if 1 or 2 more venues could be added, again, this is a bit off topic. I have these ideas that sometimes possess me for moments, and I thought, if we talked about Japanese racing, and again, this is not a critique. I just point out a few points that are valid facts. As Americans, you can't sell in Japan. It's virtually impossible to get a racing license to race in Japan. Their industry, for the most part, was built on the American dirt horse. They come to Fasig-Tipton, they buy they buy most of grade 1 winning mares, free trade, no problem. And so they trade here with impunity. We can't really trade there. What if diplomatically, nicely, somebody went to the JRA and said, we think with the facts as demonstrated, we're not elevating this to a point of conflict, but this is what we think would be fair and equitable. For you to put on a Breeders' Cup day to invite horses from all over the world in all categories, just like the Breeders' Cup, 2, 3, 3 up, dirt, turf. Make sure that we have to have at least, let's say, 5 North American spots, 5 European spots, 5 Japanese spots. Let's put on a $25, $30, $40 million day, invite the whole world. It's a way for you to show pride in what you are doing, what you have built. Japanese horses used to need some protection. I understand that as they were growing their brand. Now they're world-class. They're as good as or better than any horse in the world. They don't need that. It's a way to share ideas, a way to be proud of your country, purse opportunities for older horses, younger horses. It creates a synergy amongst countries. It creates this international commerce to where, you're more comfortable maybe buying a Japanese horse. They're more comfortable buying an American horse because we've come together. We've run. You've seen the quality of our horses. We've seen the quality of yours. So it really would, I think, drive international commerce both ways, as opposed to just groups coming over and buying 15 grade 1 winning mares and going home and we'll see you next year.
Right. Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, and that's the whole point of the exercise, isn't it? Is to try to get worldwide interest and worldwide participation in these races. And you're right. You almost have to throw it out there where you say, okay, if we're going to do this together in the spirit of continuity, we're going to have the first one at one of your tracks, and you can highlight and showcase what you do, and we can bring our better horses there, which is a phenomenal idea. John, if I'm going to pivot on you for a second, one of the things that we also talked about off air was this advent and supporting of super trainers. And again, free trade says that we can do whatever the hell we want. If we want to give horses to the top 5 trainers in the world, and they have 1,000 starters, then as an owner, that's my risk for doing it. But the reward is I can tell my buddies that I have Chad Brown training horses for me, or I have Bob Vapper training horses for me. What's your take on super trainers, and should they be allowed, or is there something we can do to police it and maybe have a cap on them? Because stall applications don't work anymore. It used to be where there was a finite number of stalls, and trainers couldn't get big because they just weren't able to have the stall capacity on racetracks. Now racetracks are so underwhelmed with horses on the grounds that if a trainer comes in and says I need 200 stalls, they basically would grant it to them.
Again, I think this question is a mirror image of the mare cap, book size, etc.
Yep.
There's a lot of negative consequences to concentrated power in every business, to the point of monopolists, undue influence, squeezing the other guy out. I understand that, but at the same time, everybody that's a quote super trainer started with one horse.
Right.
So I don't know how you monitor or govern that. And like, for example, and I say this nicely, not in any offense, but if you think about it, at Woodbine, who would be considered a super trainer?
Oh yeah, no question, my guy, absolutely. Absolutely.
And he's a great horseman, and he's enthusiastic, and he loves the game, and his family's been, he's a pure horseman. So, and if one horse doesn't run well, he shuffles another one in. And that's great for his owners, because anytime I've seen Mark Casse, like if there's stake, there's two in there. One comes from Delaware. I mean, he is so active, so perceptive. He wants to win every race. He wants to give his owners every chance. And, anytime one person in any field wins more than everybody else, there's less opportunities for others. So, and if you carry that, it might seem to ridiculousness, but if you carry that thought forward, what about jockeys like the Ortiz brothers? Oh, they're riding how can a young guy get started? So I agree that it'd be way healthier for the business if things were more spread out. I don't know how you do that. I think it's impossible to tell an elite guy, you can't buy this horse and train this horse because you are a quote number. And particularly so when no other part of the business is regulated, and you're going to pick me, a trainer, to say what I can and can't do, but you're not going to tell a breeder he can't breed 300 mares. So it's difficult. But it's a disturbing trend when Hall of Fame caliber people, even some in the Hall of Fame, can make a living. And again, in that we're a regulated business, so much of what we do is dependent upon legislation. You talk about takeout, you talk about slot revenue, you talk about licensing, dates. Everything is so regulated that I don't know. It just seems to me that it's problematic, because when not enough people make a living or support an industry, when these issues come up, you just don't have this foundational support that you might need if there is for example, a vote. We're sending slot revenues, and if four guys make a living breeding and training, and no one else has anything to do with it, you're less likely to have, access or impactful influence on decision makers. So I find it sad. Again, I won't mention any names. I know there's some guys that, that struggle with 8, 10, 12 horses that have trained Eclipse Award winners. And, I don't know the remedy, but I agree it's problematic. And, I just like, having 140 yearlings by particular horse in a sale, I think it's problematic. But, I would say with respect to breeders, I think I said this earlier, you're really complicit if you know that a horse is going to breed 280 mares, 200, whatever the number is, and you send 3, and then when you get the yearling sale, you complain, nobody's seeing my horse. He's a nice horse, but he didn't meet, he's not at 10, he's a 7+. Nobody's looking. Well, that's because there's lots of them. So, you have a choice to, the breeders hold all the cards, right? So I send a stallion, until you sign the contract, she's not bred. And, we have a herd mentality, and there's some kind of sort of invisible inertia that decides who someone should breed to as a freshman horse, who the hot horse is. Some of it is evidentiary, some of it is just by some, it's almost mystical, like, oh, you got to have one of these. And then everybody goes there. And, I've done it myself. We've supported horses like that. We also stand stallions, Charlatan that like people went crazy for. And, we bred more mares than probably we should have. But, if I don't take those mares, the horse I have to try to explain, they don't get any support. So, I always said that, if you could guarantee a book of 125 mares for 4 consecutive years, I'd be happy to abide by that. But, you go 200, then 130, then 70, and, so if you amortize that over 4 years, you achieve that balance. But you didn't have that bumper crop year, you can't validate what you paid for that stallion prospect. So I think there's a lot of swirling problems that probably don't have a definitive answer. But I think the challenge in this business is to try to identify, one at a time, some things that we can fix, some offered solutions that demonstrate that they're going to aid and move forward a particular cause. For example, this Breeders' Cup modernization of nominations. You're going to create millions of dollars for the Breeders' Cup. Then, the challenge is that money would go to purse. It doesn't go to some invisible cause or goes into a reserve fund that doesn't, benefit the horse owner.
Or that never pays out.
Exactly. Yeah, well, same thing. The Churchill have now increased the Derby purse. There's talk about aftercare and Rapoli getting involved in that. So, we can, any time you have sort of 30 years of benign neglect where sort of avarice and greed and sort of a hierarchy of nepotism has controlled a business, then if it was easy, it would be done. So, obstruction of entry where you can have some influence, I believe is a significant problem. Again, I'm not critiquing any particular family or name, but if in a meritocracy, which is what this country should be, if you, your son, and your cousin have been in charge for 75 years,
right,
that's more like a monarchy, but we don't recognize monarchies here. So, fresh ideas, fresh influence, or, that's always what's needed. And, you look at General Electric, great companies that didn't innovate and change, now you have Apple. So at some point, I think that being able to pierce that bubble of entry is really, really important. And, sometimes he's crass, sometimes he's crude, but a guy like Mike Rapoli sees that, recognizes that, and, I think he's going to, insert himself into, I hope he can focus, because as I told him, Mike, what you need are wins, we have an unlimited number of critics in the business. And I said earlier, I listened to that show with Tinky, he's eloquent. He points out lots of problems, but I haven't heard him offer a concrete solution that advances the sport. And I'm not knocking the guy. He's a smart guy, and I think he makes some valid points, but I don't think we need enlightened or eloquent criticism.
Right.
We know it. We have to take action to fix things. And it's probably 20 steps, but a 20-step journey. You've got to make the first one, rather than complain about number 15. So
I got you. I mean, that's what we try to do on this show is pierce that bubble and start getting on that path to solutions. Jon, thank you so much for coming on for the time. One quick question before we leave. Curlin is sponsoring the Florida Derby this Saturday. Are you going to be there to present the trophy to Jon Green after Hades wins the Florida Derby?
Yes. I'm going to be there. I might have my eldest son do the presentation, or I might do it. But good luck, and I hope your horse runs his best race. And if I could make one point, because I've been reading about it, and I think it's something that again is a bit of a quandary and needs sorting. This idea of contamination and drugs, and I was thinking that we read about all these innocuous positives, etc. If we had a threshold at which it's scientifically absolutely proven that you can have no effect upon performance, I don't think they should be called as positives. If I drive 31 in a 30-mile speed zone, I don't get a ticket. It's irrelevant. And it really, from a perception point of view, you read all these drug positives, and if I didn't know about the business, they're all cheaters. They used to it's a minor bute overage. It's it's something that was clearly contamination. And if we could eliminate all of that, a reasoned, sensible person would say the only objective that we have is to eliminate cheating in the business. And while I wouldn't speak for everybody, because not everybody would agree with this, I believe that therapeutic medication that has shown its efficacy is approved by the FDA, has been studied, helps a horse, and is good for everybody's business. They're sounder. They're more apt to give their true performance, better for owner, trainer, jockey, etc. But these exotic drug cheaters need to be eliminated from the game. But I think, the Rusty Arnold thing, a guy can't be in the business for 50 years and all of a sudden he's trying to take an edge. Clearly, it was a mistake. And we drag them through the mud. They have to hire lawyers and they get suspensions and appeals. I think that's bad imagery for our business. And it's sort of self-created. And, the same thing with penalties. Like, again, I know at times it's controversial, but I just feel so strongly that, the Bob Baffert thing is just so bad for the business that, there were some that would have thought 2 years is not enough. There have been people say 2 years, that's ridiculous. It's way too much. But when a racetrack could arbitrarily decide to change a written penalty after the fact with no further demonstration of a rules violation, inadvertent, accidental, purposeful, etc., I think that's very dangerous. And again, I qualify by saying I'm a big fan of Bob Baffert. I think he's just a remarkable, unbelievable horseman. Yes, he gets the best horses, but most of them are ones that he physically looks at and says, I love this horse. He did it when he was, I think, the first horse he bought, he won a British Cup Sprint. So, jurisprudence means that whatever your penalty is, it doesn't really matter in his opinion. Once you serve your time, if arbitrarily you can just extend ad nauseum as you feel, that's somebody's life, it's somebody's living, it's somebody's family. And forget a personal view. If the fine is the fine, the suspension is the suspension. And to say you're spreading a, quote, false narrative, all he's doing is representing his side of the case. That's, you have the ability to appeal. That's why you have a Supreme Court. You can defend yourself. You're defending your liberty is the number one, I think, premise of being an American. And now the Derby is all in a quandary. Does he have the best horse? Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. He can't run here. If he wins, he takes the points or doesn't get the points. It just, we're creating such a conundrum that is self-imposed. If you want to make it 3 years, 5, whatever you want to make it, and then when it's over, it's over.
No, right. I'm with you. And we've said that I'm not as big of a fan of Baffert as you, but like this, there was no legal justification for extending that suspension. Jon, appreciate the time, brother. Thank you so much. I always love your insights, and keep fighting the good fight on the breeding side in particular.
Great. Thanks for having us, and keep doing a great job with your show.
Thanks, Jon. All right, so that's going to do it for episode 36 of Rail Talk. Don't forget to go subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast, Audible. All the buttons are down below. Like and comment. And obviously we appreciate the fans who have gotten us to this milestone, and it's only up from here. So appreciate you guys. Thanks to Jon Green. Thanks to John Sikura for stopping by and chatting with us. Thanks to our producer, Patty Wolf, and our associate producers, Anthony LaRocca, Aaliyah LaRocca, Nathan Wilkinson, Julia Agresta. We'll see you next week back here on Rail Talk.